Ndau chieftainships and the role of women. The 1960 installation of Chief Mutema in the Sabi Valley, Zimbabwe. The Ndau are democratic to a fault. Women are most commonly the mediums for the respected ancestors who return to reinforce traditional practice. The women who were so possessed held a place of honor as transmitters of tradition in the family and enjoyed the influence that went with it. They reminded fathers, as parents or as leaders, that they are constrained by the values of the community in which they function. A quote from Charles Blakeney, "My father." This is narrated by Carol Blakeney. Photographs were taken in 1960 by Charles Blakeney, and additional testimony is given by the renowned scientist and poet of Zimbabwe, Christopher Magadza. This is the deceased Chief Mutema, Gadzai, descendant of Chipapami. This photograph was taken in 1956 on a visit to congratulate him. He did not sit on his leopard skin for more than 3 years. In 1960, his younger brother, Madzon Ganyai, was installed. On and off for a few months after Gadzai's death, family and neighbors gathered on the highlands of Nagaone to mourn his passing. The Devure joins the Sabi River 3,000 feet below. That's about 1 kilometer away. Here, people are gathering for the seating ceremony of the new Chief Mutema at his Sabi Valley home. A long line of men with sullen faces filed in from the direction of Nagaone. The Highland faction, who had not gotten their way in the selection of the new chief, were staging a dignified protest. No one was making threats. There was no violence, but that did not mean that everyone was happy with the outcome of whatever deliberations resulted in the choice of Madzon Ganyai. Stephen Magadza declined to contest the Mutema chieftainship in 1960 so as not to instill a rift in the community. This photograph was provided by his son, Christopher Magadza. Christopher Magadza writes, "My surname, Magadza, means one who ordains the chief. Story goes that there were bitter wars between the Ndau and the Buhera. One of my ancestors was a warrior soldier who routed the Buhera forces across the Sabi River. For his gratitude, Chief Mutema called him Magadza over his Sitoli family name, and he was supposed to preside over the installation of the Mutema chiefs. The chieftainship is always hotly contested among the eligible candidates. At some time, this became too much for my Magadza ancestors. They immigrated from Nagaone to the area now called Burma Valley and stretching into the Mozambique side. Around 1960, there was a delegation from Nagaone to persuade my father to accept the offer of the Mutema chieftainship. His response was that his grandparents left Nagaone as refugees. He was not keen to reignite the chieftainship contestations, so the elders went ahead and installed the candidate whose investiture you witnessed. That's my side of the story. We had a family uncle called Meo Neke, but we first knew him as Sitole. He was in the Mutema dynasty. Each time we visited him in Lower Mutema, he introduced me as his senior. Anyway, this is my story. No written evidence except yours," referring to the photographs taken and described by Charles Blakeney in 1960. The mortal citizens of the Mutema chieftainship were not the only ones in attendance. A full complement of ancestral spirits were on hand to celebrate the event. Their representatives were powerful women. These are spirit mediums holding mbemba, the ceremonial acts of Ndau ancestors. This spirit medium, Mus Bikiro, is possessed by the spirit of a Zulu ancestor. The first official event was a protestation of innocence. Chiefs do not die natural deaths. In the Ndau ceremony, anyone with a motive for killing the chief puts ground meal on his or her head and brushes it off, declaring, "I did not kill the chief." The crowd gathers around the spirit drum belonging to the deceased chief. Then the time came to dismantle the drum that the deceased used to summon his ancestors. Now that he had become an ancestor himself, he no longer needed the drum. Here, everyone has reconvened around the throne. Here is the acting chief, or Samarinda. The chief-elect appeared with his elder sister, who had been the acting chief during the interregnum, the period between successive reigns. Her role reflected to centuries-old traditions that the first Mutema's sister relayed the instructions of the sacred voice to her brothers. Draping purple cloth over the new chief. The final act in the ceremony was the response from his subjects. In the open ground at the chief's feet, they laid quantities of token gifts, mostly small coins and bracelets. Here is Madzon Ganyai, younger brother of Gadzi, the modest new Chief Mutema, in 1960. The headman or chief will make a decision only after the elders review precedents. When they have reached a consensus, the headman or chief will articulate the consensus and put it into effect as necessary.